Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy, also known as ETCG1 on this channel. And hey, if it's your birthday,
happy birthday.
Awesome, happy birthday. See, you got one from Brian this time, so you're super special in this episode. Dark Matter Pikachu, that engine thing behind us inside the Fairmont. Brian is here because he was an integral part of naming Dark Matter Pikachu. So today we're going to go through the story of how this happened. I wrote this out in a newsletter, July newsletter to be specific. I'll put a link in the description of my blog if you want to learn about behind the scenes kind of stuff and you feel like using your eyeballs for more than just watching videos. You can actually use it to interpret words and read stuff. Well, anyway, this is Cameraman Brian. For those of you not familiar with Cameraman Brian, he's the guy that follows me around with a camera, puts up with my BS, and helps bring you the coolest Eric the Car Guy videos ever. Ever. On this particular occasion, we were in Wapakoneta. I had some trouble saying that during the shoot, didn't I?
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah, a couple times. You're like, it's got a P. It's not a K. Kept telling me I was saying it wrong. I'm like, what? I was saying it wrong. So that's the other thing Brian does, is he helps sort of direct me. He's the first viewer. So if it sucks, it's his fault.
True.
So we're in Wapakoneta. We're hanging out with Justin and Kevin Frishy.
Right.
Of Calvinator Engines.
Which is super cool, by the way.
They are super cool, and Calvinator Engines was cool. In fact, Brian here kind of found his inner machinist. He started playing around with the Sandblaster. He had a whole lot of fun with the Sandblaster, and he also did one of the valve covers on Dark Matter Pikachu behind us. Spent a lot of time, it was all painted black, and you had to like sand off the paint to get down to the aluminum underneath. And he spent a great deal of time doing that. But I've got to say, you seem really happy.
It's gratifying. Sandblasting, I guess it's like a pressure washer kind of thing, or it's somewhat cathartic.
Yeah. So I mean, he was like kidding. He was watching me do it. I was sandblasting something, and
I was like, "That looks cool."
Yeah. He sort of had this little brother look on his face. I'm like, "You want to try it?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And I handed him basically the sandblaster, and it came back an hour later, and he had everything like perfectly sandblasted and had this great big grin on his face. So
all true.
So I'm not going to pay you from here on out. I'm just going to give you a sandblaster so you can have that in your apartment.
I would accept that.
Whenever you get bored.
Yep. just sandblast things.
Sandblast away.
It's a lot of fun.
But we should sort of get to the whole point of the video, which is Dark Matter Pikachu.
Yes.
All right. So Dark Matter Pikachu got its name because of Brian in many ways. We were to the point where we were painting the engine block. And I was masking things off, and I masked the whole front where the water pump and everything was, and we did part of the cylinder and the lifter valley and all that kind of stuff was all masked off. But Brian looks at it and says,
"It looks like Pikachu."
He said it looked like Pikachu.
And it was neon yellow tape, so it stood out.
That's important.
I just glanced up at the way the shape was, and I'm not even a huge. Was it Pokemon, Pikachu? Is it the same?
He's got a stack of cards in his
I
glove
don't.
box right
I
now.
swear I don't.
He's got to catch them all.
I don't, but not a huge fan. But obviously I knew.
Obviously he knows Pikachu.
Of Pikachu and seen.
Not a fan, but he knows Pikachu.
Seen pictures of it and stuff.
Yeah, seen pictures.
And stop. And just looked up at how that was masked and said, "That looks like Pikachu." And he looked at me like.
Well, honestly, the minute he said it, it fit, because it was the front of the engine where all the water passages are behind the water pump and the timing cover and all that stuff. So it really did have a look of, you really could see Pikachu in there. So I took it a step further. I grabbed a marker, and if you're in a machine shop, there's Sharpies everywhere, sort of. Yeah. There's Sharpies everywhere. So I just took a Sharpie and I drew what I interpreted as Pikachu on the front of the engine, and it kind of fit.
It worked, and you got a little art background, so that helped, and it wasn't just scribble.
No, well,
it actually looked pretty good.
Okay, so it was a somewhat educated scribble, we'll call it, but
it was.
So we had the Pikachu part. Now for part B of the Dark Matter side of things.
Yep.
Originally, I was going to paint the engine Ford blue, so I was going to go traditional Ford blue and everything, and then Brian says. Remember what you called it?
It looked like a Ford tractor.
Yeah.
It's the same. Yeah. It's got to be the same exact color code.
It is.
So
it is. So he was looking at it and he says, "Well, if you paint it blue, it's going to look like a tractor," and that kind of got me a little bit. And then to seal the deal, Justin comes in and he says, "Race car engines are black."
We went.
No, we went, and he was like, "Okay, fine." So at that point. I was just like, all right, I'm outnumbered, I'm outgunned. But you know, when I thought about it, I'm like, Brian's little thing of it looks like a tractor, and I'm thinking that's not a tractor engine. That's not gonna work for me. No, it's not. You know, we put way too much effort into this thing. In fact, I was hugging the block before we actually started assembling it. I was getting fairly intimate with it. I was kind of in love with it.
I left the room, gave him some privacy.
I did need it for a few minutes there. But it was before the hot tank, so it was all good. But anyway, so out came the black paint instead of the blue paint. And that was a great suggestion. I'm really glad that I didn't go with the blue.
Yeah, I think it turned out great.
I think it
just
turned out
makes it look mean
awesome.
and a little meaner, a little.
Yeah. So I just kept laying on coats of black over and over again. And by the time it was all done, a little bit of Pikachu was still in there, and it was just sort of hazy. But the black is where the dark matter part comes in. And also the engine itself, this thing was conceived and constructed from the ground up to be a turbo engine, to be forced inducted. And the camshaft profile, everything was geared around all this. What we did with the crankshaft and the pistons, every aspect of this engine was purpose built. And in some ways, it defies physics. So that's where the dark matter part comes in. So that it exists in our universe, but it does things that are sort of, in the black art side of things. That thing put out 575 horsepower with 7.8 PSI of boost. And that was at 5,500 RPM is where I got that. That's where it peaked out. But the torque curve is flat as a pancake from 2,500 all the way across. So, and these are on the dyno runs. So this thing starts out at about 2,500 RPM at 550 pound-feet of torque, like right out of the gate at 2,500 RPM. Peaks at 622 pound-feet at 440 or 4,400 RPMs, and then just sort of levels off where peak horsepower comes in. So I mean, the torque curve is about as flat as can be, and horsepower just starts from the ground up and just builds in a nice straight line. So I literally have a power curve that looks like this on this engine, which is fantastic. It's never going to stop pulling. So to me, it's got some dark matter to it. And then the Pikachu part, I mean, that was just cool. But I think I want to get like a T-shirt or just like make a logo for this engine. Somebody sent me, darn it, I wish I could remember their name, and they sent me a sticker with dark matter Pikachu on them, which is totally awesome. In fact, I'm going to put one probably in the engine bay somewhere before it's all said and done. Dark matter Pikachu, like saying it all together, I mean, it sounds like some sort of weird Pokemon incantation, whatever, but I like the name. I also like the engine a lot. And I thought about making a logo out of like a Pikachu-like character with like a turbo for a mouth and kind of mean looking and like purple and black and just kind of, Actually not purple, because the color scheme for this ended up being in the end, everything was either black or just bare metal. So it's like black and metal.
Silver, gray.
Yeah, everything is all shades of black. And in fact, the whole car, like the differential got painted black, and then there's the aluminum cover on that. Then there's the transmission, which wasn't painted any color.
Right.
But my new transmission has a little bit of black and a little bit of red too. See, that's the thing. And the engine made so much power, I had to get a different transmission because I would have lunched the T5 had I left that in there. And that was a lot of work that Paul did. But I'm kind of thinking that the Mustang that's sitting over there, that might end up being a budget build. I'm going to have enough parts left over from the Fairmont project that I just probably could put together a whole other car. But it's not like the Mustang was a complete loss. It gave me an intake manifold, cylinder heads, some brake lines, my pedal assembly. It gave me a whole lot of stuff, and it's really nice to be able to walk over there and just pull parts off of it and do stuff.
We always say thank you, Mustang.
Thank you, Mustang.
2 points I got before we sign off, I guess. We put a lot of hours in the shop getting these videos together. I can only imagine the time he spent on the phone with these parts people and figuring all of this out, taking the data and his basically his expectations and what he wanted with this thing. I can't imagine. how much time you spent out of the shop getting this stuff together.
Well, there was also time in the shop after you went home.
Oh yeah,
and other
yeah.
days where you weren't here.
Yeah, I would bail out at
also-
6 or 7, and he'd be here till shooting his own videos till 11 midnight, and then cleaning up. You always
One.
clean up 1 in the morning, and then the
2.
second thing is these. You go out with you go in with a plan, which obviously you did, and then it just, regardless of any plan, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Oh, yeah,
in a
absolutely.
sense. Yeah, it just kind of, the plan is adhered to, and you have to have one, or you're just going to be floundering. But yeah, it just takes it on its own direction at points.
Well, that goes back to the setup of the engine and the setup of the chassis and the ideas that I had. Okay, it's going to be a street car. If I was setting this up to be a drag car, I would have set the suspension up very differently. All those components come together when at the planning stage. You sit down and you say, this is what I want this vehicle to do when I'm done. And then realistically create a plan based on that. And I'll be the first to admit that I went into unrealistic as soon as I put the turbo on it and just made stupid power with this engine. Other than that, it would probably be a more balanced car. Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, if I'm honest, but yeah, at this point, looking at the numbers and just what this thing is capable of, I'm frightened.
I think you should be,
Yeah.
and I don't pretend to know as much about it as you do, because I don't, but yeah, just the numbers that you're spitting out are just like, that's just nuts.
It is nuts.
So yeah, to keep it stuck to the road.
That's going to be the challenge. The challenge will be keeping it on the road. So hopefully, 70 miles an hour, I don't hit the gas and go sideways. Because that's a very real possibility with this car. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, we'll make sure we get it on camera so that we can share it with the world and you can watch it over and over again.
Yes.
That said, if you have automotive questions, ericthecarguy.com is where I ask you go. I'll put a link down in the description for you. Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you wish to connect with me socially, be safe, have fun.
Gotta stay dirty.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.